I'm Matt Court, and I'm a principal research specialist on the US team here at Chambers and Partners. I'm thrilled to be joined by Frank Aquila of Sullivan Cromwell for today's expert-focused video looking at the current state of the M&A market. Frank is a titan of corporate mergers and acquisition and has led on some of the most prominent and transformative transactions in recent history. He's the contributing editor to the Chambers Corporate M&A and Healthcare M&A guides, and we're hugely grateful to have him here today. Frank, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate your invitation.
Absolutely. And with that kind of very brief introduction in mind, perhaps we could start off by hearing a bit about you and about your career. So to kind of kick off, could you perhaps tell us a bit about the types of work that you typically handle and the sorts of clients that you represent?
Certainly. And to some extent, I was someone who was probably not destined to go to a firm like Sullivan and Cromwell, and certainly not stay there for 40 plus years and be in a variety of leadership roles. I was, first generation going to college, then first generation lawyer. And there really were no one else in my extended family was a professional. I actually I'd gone to Columbia undergraduate, and then I went to Brooklyn Law School as an evening student while I worked during the day. So the very fact that I was able to get an offer to join Sullivan & Cromwell as first-year associate was certainly something that would be unexpected. I really never expected to stay more than a few years. I thought that being at Sullivan and Cromwell was almost like getting a master's or doctorate in law, and that it was burnishing my resume for the future. Fortunately, I really love the work, and I guess I did a decent job because they kept me around. And as I was starting to think about next steps in my career, they were telling me that I was about to become a partner. And so that is sort of where I am 40 plus years after leaving law school. In terms of the work, as a young associate at Sullivan and Cromwell, I did a lot of different sorts of corporate work. So typical securities, U.S. Securities law work. I did due diligence on transactions. I did bank finance agreements and all of that. What really ignited things for me, and it was relatively early in my career, was I had the opportunity to work on a couple of different M&A matters in a row. And I worked harder than I had ever worked in my life. And, that was with having been to law school at night, working full time during the day. So I was working very, very hard. But in a lot of ways, I was like a kid in a candy store because I just love the different types of transactions that I was working on. And one thing that I think was particularly interesting to me, and I think was formative for me, was that given the nature of the transactions I was working on, I had the opportunity, I should really say, as a very young associate, to attend board of directors meetings of significant companies. And that really did lead to a different perception. So it's not just you're the junior person on the team doing your work in the background. I actually was in the boardroom hearing the directors debate whether to do a transaction, hearing management present why they thought it was a good idea or why they thought there were risks, whatever it may be. And that, I think, helped me become a much more well-rounded counselor. Then I became partner. did a myriad of M&A transactions. Even before I was a partner, as a senior associate at the firm, I was doing a lot of cross-border work. So I was spending a lot of time in our London office. I was working on transactions elsewhere in Europe, a few in Latin America, a few in Asia, and at this point in time, cross-border work was not as big as it's been in the last decade or so, and certainly. A relatively junior lawyer didn't get involved in those things. And again, that was something which has shaped my career, because at least half of the work I do is for non-US clients, or with US clients, doing a deal with a non-US company. So it's a very big part of my practice. A couple of areas of focus developed, as I say, late in my associate career, early in my partner career. There was a lot of bank and financial institution consolidation at that period of time, and I wound up doing a large number of those transactions, including working on the first ever hostile bid by a U.S. bank for another U.S. bank, our client Bank of New York, after a very long saga, eventually acquiring Irving Bank. And worked on a number of other bank and insurance company and financial institution transactions. I also, and this was a continuation of what I had done as an associate, did a lot of work in the consumer products retail sector. And one of the clients who I had done a lot of work for as an associate, literally from my first year as an associate, was Grand Metropolitan, and that continued during the course of my early partnership years. They acquired Pillsbury, which also had Burger King as part of it, and there was actually a lot of sort of buying and selling of companies by Grand Met, because of the fact that they were trying to refine their space. Eventually, in the mid 90s, I wound up representing Grand Met when they combined with Guinness to form Diageo, what is today Diageo. Mm-hmm. We then sold off Pillsbury, we sold off Burger King, and did the Seagram's acquisition and some of the other acquisitions that really created what everyone knows as Diageo today. And I've continued to do work for them and others in the space. In fact, although this was a little bit later, I represented InBev, the Belgian-based brewing company, in their hostile bid for Anheuser-Busch. That was the largest non-U.S. hostile bid for a U.S. company in history, and one of the largest acquisitions by a non-U.S. company of a U.S. company, and that created what is today Anheuser-Busch InBev, the world's largest brewer, and continue to do a lot of work for them. In the healthcare space, I had the opportunity to work on, as a young partner, two of the really earliest big consolidations. Our client, the Upjohn Company, merged with Pharmacia, based out of Sweden. Pharmacia had recently acquired a large Italian pharmaceutical company, so it really was the beginning of the consolidation. I also at the same time same year represented Marion Merrill Dow, a big pharmaceutical company based in the Midwest of the U.S., in their acquisition by Hearst. And those two companies really gave me a lot of credibility in the healthcare pharma space. And one of my most recent transactions, I represented our client Amgen, the world's largest biotech, in their acquisition of Horizon Therapeutics. So really, when you look at my career today, a lot of it had roots in things I was doing, early on in my career.
Yeah, yeah. And just I suppose just picking up on you mentioned with respect to cross-border M&A in particular, how that's become an increasingly sort of large component of M&A generally over the course of your career. Has M&A changed in any other ways over the course of your career? Has perhaps your role as the M&A attorney changed? Have deals changed in any other ways in terms of the shape and their size?
A few things. One is, in the 80s and even early 90s, companies tended to do acquisitions on a bit of an ad hoc basis. They didn't view it necessarily as something that was part of the way in which they operated. Today, almost all companies, certainly any larger companies, have very significant groups internally, from the financial side, from the strategy side, the marketing side, that only focus on acquisitions. That doesn't mean that these companies necessarily doing acquisitions multiple times a year, but they're very much professionalized. They're not as reliant on outside financial advisors as they once were. So I think that's certainly a change. The other thing that I think is a change is that boards have become much more attuned to potential risks. And as a consequence of that, they are much more involved. I mentioned a little bit earlier that one of the things I had an opportunity to do as a relatively young lawyer was the ability to be in the boardroom on a regular basis. That's fairly unusual for outside counsel in the first instance, and certainly for younger lawyers. And what that has done is, in some sense, created for me almost a side practice. And it doesn't sound, when I explain it, it won't sound as odd as it seems. But, after the dot-com bubble burst and, Sarbanes-Oxley and various other things, boards wanted more regular counsel on a range of issues. And since I was somebody who had spent a lot of time in boardrooms, I wound up, either from our existing clients or even with new clients, being a board advisor. And so I've, worked on things from ransomware attacks to, internal investigations, things like that. So, things certainly have changed. And, I think to some extent, it has made boards and companies more effective.
Yeah, yeah. Amazing, which kind of brings us then to 2023, and I mean it's no secret that 2023 was a challenging year for deal makers. So it'd be great to get your take on the year in M&A and talk a bit about what you saw in 2023. So firstly, I mean, what would you say were some of the main sort of pain points for your clients in 2023? What were some of the bigger challenges, some of the bigger hurdles to completing deals?
In terms of challenges and hurdles, I think you really are two main ones, and that was financing. Financing became much more expensive as central bankers were raising interest rates during 2023. Also, it's hard to sort of plan when you don't know where the interest rates are going. I think now they've leveled off, so people can factor that in, and it potentially will go down, which is positive. The other headwind that we saw was regulatory pushback, and I will say that the regulatory pushback we've received, whether it be in Europe, US, elsewhere, has actually not been as great as it might seem. It's taking longer to get major transactions done, but the number of transactions that regulators are looking at are still very, very low, under 2%. Almost all transactions are getting done. Obviously, the media will focus on the couple of transactions that don't happen, but by and large, they are happening. I think the other thing that was keeping volumes down in 2023 was that there was some uncertainty as to whether or not we would be in a recession. The U.S. would be in a recession. Europe would be in a recession, and that uncertainty led to people waiting. I think it's pretty clear that even if they're technically in recession, in 2024 or beyond, it is probably going to be pretty mild. So, most CEOs and boards are actually again looking at significant transactions. I think it was Ernst & Young did a survey of major CEOs in December, and something like 92% of them said that they anticipated doing a significant transaction in 2024. So I think you have very strong sentiment going into this year.
Yeah, and well, one result of some of those headwinds is, and we've touched on it in some of the questions, is a kind of decrease in the number of cross-border deals that were getting finished in 2023, and you mentioned as well earlier that that's kind of a significant part of your practice. So is that something you could perhaps expand upon, the cross-border aspect of M&A in 2023 in particular? Were there any kind of trends that you might highlight from that perspective?
Well, we've seen a couple of years where the cross-border work has been much lower than historically. I do think, though, that given the nature of some of the sectors that are consolidating, we're going to see a pickup in cross-border work. I mentioned Amgen acquiring Horizon Therapeutics. You may or may not know Horizon is an Irish company, and I think that in healthcare, you have some significant European healthcare giants, some significant Japanese healthcare clients. So, and a lot of them will be looking at biotechs in the U.S. Similarly, Pfizer, Merck, Eli Lilly, et cetera, they're going to be looking at acquiring some of the biotechs and other healthcare companies in Europe and Asia. So I think that will lead to a natural increase in cross-border work. Energy as well is an area where, to some extent, whether you're an Exxon or a BP or Royal Dutch Shell, you're already operating on a global basis, and they will make acquisitions, across the globe. So I think that's going to pick up there.
Yeah.
So, I think we'll see, in a number of sectors. I mean, I just pointed to those two because they're the most obvious, but I do think we'll see a pickup in cross-border work over a number of sectors.
Yeah, brilliant. And Japan, I mean, you sort of touched on there. Japan's kind of a fascinating sort of case study or sort of exception to global cross-border M&A trends, sort of demographic shifts in Japan and the impact that that's having on M&A. Is that something that you have seen in 2023, or is that something you could perhaps sort of expand upon?
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more M&A activity going into Japan and coming out of Japan. Historically, it's been very difficult for a non-Japanese company to make an acquisition in Japan. There have been rule changes in Japan that facilitate, inbound M&A activity. I think similarly, and there are demographic trends, which I'll mention just in a second, that I think is opening up the Japanese market. Similarly, those demographic trends are pushing major Japanese companies to look outside of Japan. Why is all of that happening? We all know that Japan is an aging society, that projections are that it will be smaller in 20 years than it is today. And in the past, Japan has been very protective of their companies because there was this expectation of lifetime employment. And as a consequence, there's been low unemployment there. But with an aging population, you have less and less of a labor base. And so to some extent, consolidation is helpful because you have less people to do the jobs. Additionally, Japanese families tend to invest in stocks, and they do it directly, not through mutual funds and things like that. And those big Japanese companies have to look for markets outside of Japan. They have to look for labor outside of Japan. And they know that the investors are looking towards their income stream and the dividends that these companies throw off as part of their retirement savings, which will be for some extended period of time. So as a consequence of that, the way in which Japanese companies think about it, the way in which the Japanese government think about it, really has changed. So I think we're going to see a lot more deals coming out of Japan and going into Japan.
Yeah. Brilliant. And something else to touch on, looking back at 2023, it was a huge year for private credit as well. And I mean, Chambers on our end in the sort of upcoming 2024 US guide, we're looking to instigate a new private credit table to kind of reflect that recent boom. Again, is that something that you've seen in your own practice? Is that something that you saw in 2023?
Oh, absolutely. Private credit, has become a very significant factor. To some extent, these are the same dollars that were always there, or pounds, or whatever. They were always there, but the big retirement funds, the family offices, the sovereign wealth funds, they used to put their cash, whether it's into a bank, into a hedge fund, into an insurance company, and then they would lend it as institutional lenders. But what's happened is that a lot of these major pools of capital have decided to sort of cut out the middleman, and that has meant that terms have improved, cost has gone down, and since they're not regulated financial institutions for the most part, they're able to move much more quickly and be much more nimble, which, particularly in acquisition finance, is extraordinarily important.
Yeah. The hope there being that, or the consequence there being hopefully that that's another factor that might kind of kick on M&A going forward.
It is certainly very helpful to M&A, and a very large part of our finance work at Sullivan and Cromwell
Yeah,
is in the private credit space.
yeah. Brilliant. Well, in the time then that we have left, I thought it'd be very, useful to perhaps cast our eyes forward to the year ahead and touch a bit on what you're expecting to see in 2024. So, what would you say to, the clients and practitioners, fellow practitioners watching this video? What are the topics that they ought to be mindful of going into 2024? Are there any particular challenges that you would highlight, or are there any particular opportunities perhaps that they ought to be kind of cognizant of?
Well, I think unlike 2023, there are probably more opportunities than there are challenges. Some of those challenges that I mentioned earlier from 2023 still exist, but they really have abated a fair bit. What we're focused on is that many industries, both in the U.S. and globally, really need to consolidate. There's not dramatic growth in GDP, really in any of the major economies. I mean, some are doing better than others,
Mm.
but the growth levels are relatively low as compared to historic norms. And as a consequence of that, companies are going to need to increase revenue and profitability. And if you don't do it organically, you do it inorganically. And inorganically is by and large through acquisitions, and allows you to cut costs, allows you to be more efficient. So there's that we're seeing. Beyond that is the fact that companies need to be more global. Their markets are not just local anymore. And, as we've seen in some of the supply chain disruptions, you can't depend on shipping from China to the US or Europe, or vice versa. So you need a lot more local capability to be able to deliver products and services. Also, and I think will lead smaller companies to decide that they're better off selling to bigger companies, is we focus a lot on AI and generative AI, but technological changes generally are coming in almost every sector, every aspect of our lives. And companies have to spend a lot of money to invest in that. And quite honestly, a bigger company can spread that cost out over a wider range of products. And so I think that bigger companies will be in a much better position to invest in the new technologies than smaller companies, and that will lead to smaller companies deciding that they'd be better off being part of a bigger organization. So I
Yeah.
think those are going to be the drivers for more M&A, not just in 2024, but beyond.
Yeah, perfect. Plenty to look forward to then.
Yes.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Frank, very much for that kind of fascinating insight into the current M&A landscape, and thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us today. We do really appreciate it.
Happy to do so.
You can learn more about Frank and his practice on the Sullivan and Cromwell website, and gain even more of his insight by following Chambers Global Practice Guides and Chambers Expert Focus on chambers.com. I really hope everyone's enjoyed that conversation, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks.